and welcome to Human Needs at Work podcast with Elite Mind. So those are our weekly live conversations where we discuss a variety of topics from organizational well-being industry, often discussing things that stay behind the closed doors and things that prevent workplaces from meeting people's needs at work. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Evaldas. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
So, Evaldas is leading our tech department at Elite Mind, and he's in charge of building our employee data and monitoring platform. And I thought, who would be the best person for us to talk on the topic of employee data and how we can collect the right information to make sure that we can effectively drive well-being strategy. So let's start first with a very basic introduction into, why is it important to collect right people data? And what we see from our work that a lot of companies are actually acting on assumptions and biased guesses in a way. And the way data is collected, and again, we say data, but actually there's variety of information that could be classed under that. We can see that a lot of companies don't have processes to collect the data in the right way and also to interpret it in the right way. And because of this, there are a lot of damaging results that prevent us from really driving employee well-being in companies in the right way. Everything from financial impact. So if we fail to address employee well-being and satisfaction, if we fail to address people's needs in a workplace, it leads to costs related to turnover, absences, sicknesses, lower productivity. We also waste a lot of resources. If we don't have accurate data, it's not possible to align our strategic interventions to those needs. So our interventions don't deliver the results. We can have lower engagement if our initiatives do not resonate with the staff. Also, I think our decision making really leads to a lot of operational ineffectiveness, inefficiencies. But also, there's a lot of legal and compliance risks, and I'm not an expert in that. I'm sure Evaldas will be able to tell you a little bit more about GDPR and data protection compliance, as well as brand and reputational risks that can lead to when some of those data breaches or compliance regulations are not being met. So hello to everyone who's listening. Please do say hello and please do ask us some questions. I'd love to hear how your company, your organization is collecting people data, what specific information you collect, and how exactly you are utilizing it to drive well-being strategy. So, Evaldas, let me maybe start with like very basic introduction question. Tell me a little bit more about what are the different ways that companies can collect data, and what are some of these best practices that you see of what companies are doing right now.
Yes, of course. First thing is to determine why are you collecting the data and what you want to measure, what you want to improve, because you are collecting data to improve some specific aspect of your organization, and yeah, in order to improve it, you need to measure it. And of course, then that is the first question that you need to answer, because maybe you want to improve the efficiency of your employees. Then you would use one set of tools, and if you want to see how, let's say, the employees are feeling or their well-being, then you use other tools and other approaches. So the first step would be to identify what you want to improve. Then, based on the what you want to improve, you would collect a list of data what you need to measure in order to uh, reach your improvements, and then you would pick the tools for the measurements, and then you have possibilities between active measurements and passive measurements. And then, say, for the active measurements, you have some different kinds of platforms. They can be inside of the internal tools, HR platforms, to send surveys to the employees, questionnaires, assessments. Uh, there are also like ready platforms that you can use, like SurveyMonkey, Typeform, etc. Also, another way is passive monitoring. So you are not sending any data to the employees, to the people. You are monitoring what they are doing, how they're doing, what the tools they're using. Monitoring like maybe the chats, the messages, etc. For that, there are also some tools like Viva from Microsoft. They're monitoring, let's see, how many time you are disturbed outside of the working hours, how many meetings you have, how many time you spend on emails, how many time you spend on chats, etc. So yeah, like for the performance monitoring, it's a good tool, because then you can see how many hours from those 8 working hours people actually are spent on working, how many they are spent on meetings, how many they spend on chats, on emails. uh, and yeah, so basically, like I said before, the first step is to decide what you want to improve. Then based on that, you can pick what you want to measure, and then once you know what you want to measure, then you would pick active and or passive monitoring and tools, basically to suit your needs, to collect the data that would be usable for you.
I love this. I love that you start with a question of why you even collecting this data, because I think nowadays it's very easy to collect information, right? And we can know everything about everyone. We know that our digital footprint, the moment I open my screen in the morning, I check my phone, all of my actions leave some sort of digital footprints everywhere. And of course, this can be used in a very kind of positive ways, in a way, let's say, to make sure that we can improve employee work-life balance, right? And their effectiveness and productivity, and track their performance. But also, I think then this also creates a lot of opportunities for abusing the data, right? So a lot of, obviously, we know in advertising, we know that maybe in some different product, and even like tailoring specific information, it can be used against us. So I think if we speaking about the concept of HR, the way that information is being collected can sometimes be used against that person, right? So we see cases of whistleblowers, people who raise specific concerns about the employers, where maybe there are people are not happy about something, and they kind of speak up against their boss and so on. So what are some of these best practices um, to kind of protect people's data and make sure that it's not being used or abused against them?
Yeah, right. So you are totally correct. It's like when you ask somebody a question directly to like in person, they will not tell something about their boss, or the manager, or some maybe even the colleague. This data, yeah, there's some data that needs to be collected, of course, anonymously, without traces to person, especially if you want to have accurate readings. But that is also depends on the data itself, because imagine that you have a questionnaire regarding, I don't know, you trying to prevent the suicide prevention, and you're asking people questions to see how risky, how likely it is. Of course, you don't want this data to be available to everyone, but you need to have safeguards in places. If some person is at the brink of suicide, you don't want his data to be lost and aggregated in the middle with the other data. You want to have some safeguards so you can act on the critical situations. But yeah, that should be for the, let's say, situations that are critical and you need to act for the specific person. If you're collecting data for I don't know, the office culture, atmosphere in the office, or how you are being treated by the uh, line managers, etc. Yeah, then this data, it is best if it's aggregated and anonymized, and that it would not trace to a specific person. So, of course, like the person that fills in the data, the questionnaire, the survey, they they if they know that this data is not being traced back to a specific person, then they can uh, well, they feel more free, and then they can express their feelings without any, well, without being afraid that somebody will tell it to them. And
And without
for that
fear of the judgment. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, without fear of judgment, or even, like maybe uh, you say something and then next day says, oh yeah, you don't like this one, so goodbye, pick up your stuff, you're fired, as of now. So yeah, in order to allow employees to express their feelings and thoughts freely, data should be not traceable to any specific person. And then yeah, the data can be for the management, for the HR, the data should be anonymized and aggregated. So you do not see, let's say, the individual answers, but you can see aggregated data. So it's not, it's harder to then to trace back to a specific individual.
Yeah, I think you're raising here a very important point about kind of, first of all, this kind of like psychological safety. Like, is it safe for us anyway to talk and be honest and, highlight some of these concerns without having some of those consequences taken against us? And this involves, not necessarily just, kind of written official data collection and surveys, but also, just in general, do we have open conversations with our employees? Do we have a way to check in with people, and do we create for them that safe environment to speak up? And then when it gets to those surveys and really digging deeper and highlighting some of those concerns that maybe people are not feeling um, confident to be able to talk openly, then we create this dilemma about, how much of that has to be aggregate and where exactly this needs to be triggered to maybe provide specific support to the individual. Like in case, like you mentioned, let's say, potential suicide and so on, of course you don't want to have that trigger lost in the overall confidential aggregate. So what are the best practices of keeping the data overall confidential, but actually triggering some sort of warning and where that information should go, right? Is it employer that should see those, let's say, risks and actions, or maybe there's something that needs to be highlighted to, third impartial party that can intervene and provide that support directly without necessarily even knowing who that is, from the employer's point of view.
Yeah, I think that anyway, the safeguards should be put in place based on the technology. So it's not that that somebody else is looking at the results and identifying where are the risks, etc. Because then for that the persons would need to have access to the data. So it is best if the safeguards are put in place using technology. Uh, Nowadays, they are of course, like depending on the technologies that are used, or on what kind of tools are used to collect the data. Uh, there can be a monitoring on top of the collection of the data, either within the same tools, either using external tools, also perhaps using artificial intelligence. Nowadays, it's very capable to use some predictive analytics as well, not only descriptive analytics by collecting the data and checking what we have, but also using AI to predict the future, predict the what could happen based on the answers, and then have ways to inform somebody based on the what kind of risks there are. They might be, maybe it can be internal HR, maybe it can be IT. Let's say if the issues are uh, with the let's say, I don't know, like with somebody clicked on the link in the phishing email, etc., and data what was leaked, etc., then this perhaps should go to the security officer. And if it's something with the mental health, I agree that it should be best if it goes to some third party that is not directly related. It is not hired by the company, because then it is easier for the employee to open up, and it is also uh, protecting their data for the employee, because then this is like a say patient client or coach client confidentiality, and it stays between them, and the issue still can get addressed. But that does not mean that your data, your issues will get leaked to the management, to the colleagues, to the other employees.
And I really like this concept of, utilizing the tech to highlight some of the risks and the severity of those risks, and kind of like do this triage of directing person directly to the expertise, to the right support, instead of kind of going through the entire cycle of, your line manager, your HR, your asking support resources and so on, but really utilizing technology directly to receive help from the expert. Because also what this means that it frees up a lot of time and responsibility, and actually even reduces all of this kind of accountability risk from the employer, that at the end of the day, we cannot expect managers and employers to be therapists and mental health experts, right? So it's very difficult for them to judge what kind of support to provide, where to escalate, who's supposed to receive it. And utilizing technology through the way we collect the data to refer to that expertise, I think it's really, really important. So we kind of mentioned briefly about all of the other kind of like regulatory requirements, data protection, GDPR, and most of the time I see that HR, or let's say well-being leads, well-being ambassadors, they don't necessarily have the relevant training and awareness to actually handle the data properly. So obviously in a big organizations we have maybe a person who's responsible for data security and all of the certification for the organization. But what should be the relationship between the two, and how maybe smaller organizations that don't necessarily have the data, the technology, and the separate person who's managing all of the data compliance side, how can we still remain compliant? What are some of the basics that we all need to be aware of when working with data?
So first thing is, of course, now we have GDPR regulations, and they state what kind of measures should be put in place if we are collecting personal data. And of course, it depends. For the children, it's more restrictive. For the adults, it's less restrictive. But of course, always the data should be encrypted. Nobody should have unauthorized access. Yeah, the data should be encrypted, and transit and at rest. So that means that even if somebody gets access to the physical storage where the data is stored, it's not possible to read it. And also by data in transit, it means that if it travels from data center to your browser, that is not possible to intercept and decode or read this data. Uh, so yeah, one thing is security, and like you mentioned, of course, HR. For HR, it's important that they collect the data. They are not necessarily want to get involved in nitty gritty technical details, and for that, of course, bigger companies have data security officers, but smaller companies, yeah, usually they don't have it, but still and they should have someone that is responsible for the IT. And then it's not that HR is only picking the platforms that they want to use, but they should also involve IT or security officers to create a list of the requirements. See, when you want to collect data from the employees, uh, when you already determined what for you're going to collect and what kind of data will be used, then you should sit with somebody from IT and data security and compliance officers, if you have them, and collect the list of the requirements. What uh, the basically make a list of requirements for the platform that you want to use, and then when selecting the platform, you need to be mindful of those requirements, and yeah, you should be careful with the security requirements and making sure that they comply with the GDPR, that data is secure, that it's not possible to leak this data, and also that somebody who does not have access will not accidentally somehow click some other link or something like that and see a list of confidential data.
So, how safe is it to use some of those, public survey platforms, right? You mentioned like Typeform, SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, we have Airtables, we have all of these, different companies that all have different way to store and process data. Do we have any kind of indication on if let's say if we have a small company and I don't necessarily have our internal HR platform that can administer and kind of slice and dice the data and deliver those surveys, and if I'm just deciding to use some public one, which one, what are the processes that we should follow there? Is there any indication of what is safer to use, which one is easier to hack into, and how do we protect people data in that case?
Basically, from the hacks and the encryption, most of those platforms should be safe because they are usually provided by big companies, and if they want to provide the services in a European Union, they are GDPR compliant. But the problem with those platforms is that somebody then will see the data from everyone with all the response. They will see individual responses, which means that they can easier, well, if they see some individual response, especially if the company is smaller, it's relatively easy to cross-reference answers with the actual people. So I think that's by using platforms like that, especially like Google Forms or even a Typeform, even if you don't ask people their first name, last name, or username or email, they still let's say there is a person that actually can log in and see the individual responses. And for the smaller companies, that might be risk because then they can identify individuals based on their answers.
Yeah. So, right. So let's look specifically about what data exactly we should be collecting to monitor employee well-being. And as we know, employee well-being organizational well-being is still quite a new industry. I started hearing my voice back. I don't know, Evalda, if there's some settings your end or something that I just start to hear my voice back. Uh, so, okay, let's see. Now I'm hearing it loud.
I'm actually even muted my microphone, so that shouldn't be coming from me.
Oh, how interesting. Okay, I think it's okay now. Yeah, so there are some basic data that we encourage every company to collect. And I think these are basics of your retention, turnover rates, your engagement, satisfaction rates, sickness and absence rates, as well as reasons for that sickness and absence. Also, net promoter score, so how likely your employees are to recommend this company to others, and also productivity. And I think this is also something that you mentioned as well, that it could be collected, using some of these kind of like more passive measures, right? And outputs. And I think the relationship between those two kind of five pieces of data can show a lot about how well the company is providing for the needs of employees, even though it doesn't really dive in deeper into what those needs are and the impact of any interventions. So when we look at the next level of kind of diving deeper, some of this kind of intermediate data, we want to now monitor not only just, let's say, productivity, but we want to monitor performance, right? We really want to understand how well people are performing at their best level. We also want to look at whether this performance is somehow affected by work environment, or is it affected by their personal health needs and risks. So we want to monitor things like work related stress, maybe some of those boundaries like you mentioned, right? Like, are they answering their emails calls outside of their working hours, and or are there some of these clear boundaries and levels of stress from that perspective. But we also want to check basic level of health and kind of health burden or organization. So what are specific physical, mental, emotional illnesses that people have? What are specific disabilities, specific neurodiverse needs that people have? Because if we don't know what they are from personal point of view, we are not able to provide for them. Um, and then here is one that companies are very often monitoring, and it can be used in a very different way, and that's engagement rates of specific services that we are using. So if, let's say, you have employee assistance program, it is very useful to understand to what extent people are using. But also, I think what is very important is to have the data back from all of these processes to be able to then make strategic decisions for it, right? And this is not just about the data, but about the analytics. And like you mentioned, all of the kind of predictive analytics, where we are able to look at the data and say, okay, so this is the level of sickness, this is the level of absence, these are specific health needs, these are specific personal concerns that people are having. What can we change? What can we introduce? To what extent people are using it? And does it actually have an impact? So does it actually change the initial descriptive data, right? So your initial sickness, turnover, your absence rate, productivity, performance levels, and so on. So what are the best ways of generating these kind of insights and this kind of predictive analytics to make sure that we can really use it to drive our decisions, right? Like strategic decisions for leadership, for management, and for kind of strategy direction.
Yeah, so you need to have a tools that can first that you can collect collect data, provide descriptive analytics, and then if we are measuring like overall well-being for the employees, overall performance, overall atmosphere or working conditions, then the data should be aggregated. It can be aggregated for the whole company, per department, or per section, or depends on, of course, on how detailed you want to have it and how you want to measure. And you should also have a tool that allows you to compare results, uh, see current results with what you had last month, 2 months ago, or 3 months ago, or a year ago, so you can see the trend lines. Not only that you can see what we have now or what is predicted in the future, but that you can also see it in the past, what you had, and then you can see whether it's improving or not. Because yeah, if you want to make sure that your changes are making an impact, you need to be able to measure it, and you need to be able to compare it with the previous data to see whether it is actually improving or is just a perception of improvement.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what we can see that very often, let's say HR well-being leads are trusted with, administering some of those surveys processes, but actually they don't necessarily have a capacity to analyze the data in a right way and make some of those decisions in a way that can be fed back to the board, to senior leadership, to inform some of their strategic decisions. And that's the biggest value of some of those services that can be provided for this. And that's why we are advocates for making sure that companies are outsourcing their data collection and data analytics to external provider, because that allows, like you mentioned before, this kind of confidential data collection, aggregates, interpretation of it to create these kind of predictive analytics, um, and track the impact of those initiatives, and also, most importantly, highlight specific support for these individuals and direct them to experts and kind of do this triage in a way that's confidential and that protects vulnerable person from potentially them having losing the job or being affected by the workforce. So yeah, that all sounds great, and I think it's probably right time that we also introduce the platform that we are building at Elite Mind. And we can see, for me, working as a well-being consultant, I can see many companies don't have those processes, systems, and that's why you are building some of that platform to address all of these needs that we have discussed. So do you just want to talk briefly about what our diagnostic platform does, and how does that process look like from employee perspective and from their employer perspective?
Yeah, sure. So basically, our platform is a three-way platform. We have our consultants, we have employees, and we have businesses. And then, so the assessments are being created by our consultants. Then, as soon as the organization is onboarded, they can provide the link to sign up for their employees. Employees fill in their profile, which is for them, it's not for the company. And then they have surveys or assessments to fill in. Those can be monthly assessments, they can be some smaller weekly assessments, or even daily check-ins, depending on the company needs. And then the data that they entered is basically anonymized for the company management, because we have the reports and dashboards to see the data, but it is aggregate of the data. It's not possible to see individual responses. They can only see aggregates, and of course they can filter, let's say, based on the department of the organization, or filter only, let's say, those that are managers, or only those that they don't have management responsibilities. So there are some filtering, but it's not till the level that you can actually get individual responses and start identifying people. And then our consultants, they do not see individual responses either. What they see is some statistics on how many people completed some assessment, whether they stuck on some specific question, uh, things like that. And then to have some safeguards or some flags if uh, because assessments questions are split into multiple categories, and if employee has high risk in one of the categories, then yeah, they would get flagged, and then coaches or therapists that are responsible for those categories, they would get a notification that they can then analyze the data and see whether the technology flagged them correctly or not. And if they see that they were flagged correctly and that they need some intervention, yeah, then it would be up to those coaches or therapists to reach out to the specific person and propose uh, some solution, or yes, so propose provide support for them.
Yeah, I think really the magic is in this kind of human touch to the data, right? So even though we have technology that kind of collects, analyzes the data, anonymizes, and so on, there is still a human overview of making some review and kind of analyzing summary of the data, and again, having this human touch of intervention where it's needed, and creating this confidential feedback loop back to the business, where we can inform leaders and equip them with the real data about how the people are really feeling, what effect their working environment and culture and the quality of the leadership is having on their physical, emotional, mental health. What is the quality of support ecosystem that we have in this organization, internally and externally, and use this to track the impact of some of those specific interventions that we are introducing um, to to employees. So, yeah, on that note, I'd like to thank you, Evaldas, for your contribution, and I can't wait to launch our platform fully. As at the moment, we are still, testing, building, and so on. If you are listening to this and it sounds like your company would benefit from testing this platform or having this kind of data analytics, please do reach out to us, as we are looking for our first few pilot organizations to test our platform, so you can benefit from for the solution being tailored specifically to your business. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Have a good day.
Bye bye. Have a good day.